T. Towson, Baltimore, WNST.net. It is baseball season opening day, Oriole Ball, which allows me to catch up with this guy. I chased him around a little bit around Super Bowl time. We didn't catch up. He was on before Sig and Mike Elias came aboard, and then again after they were hired, and he is coming to Baltimore this week to bring Astroball here. Ben Reiter joins us, SI, author, all that good stuff. Ben, I'm going to make a really I'm going to throw myself under the bus before you come to Baltimore. Is that fair to say? I gave my copy of Astroball that I bought immediately, Amazon had it overnight. You remember I sort of, binge read it on a Thanksgiving weekend, and I called you before and after I read it. And I don't have the book because I gave it to Luke. So I don't be mad at me, but I gave it to Luke at the Super Bowl. So I have to hold up on my phone the cover of your book because I don't have your book to hold up. But I loved your book, and it's great to have you on. It's great to have you in Baltimore. And I think it's great to have Sig and Mike Elias running the team. I mean, certainly they got off to a great start at the beginning and beat the Yankees up and stuff, but this is a long-term thing, right? And I guess your book sort of points that out, and everybody's sort of pumping the brakes on expectations, but this is the beginning, and you were into Astroball in the beginning, right?
That's right, and no need to apologize, Nestor. This gives you another opportunity to buy another copy of the book now that it's out in paperback, since you gave your first one away. And in fact, the new copy has a new afterword in it at the end that digs into some of the reasoning why Mike and Sig decided to come to Baltimore. I mean, of course.
Hold on, so there's more. There's an afterword. What? Really? There's an updated
new
version.
Material in the paperback.
See, I didn't even
to
know that.
Incentivize you to buy it. Of course, it's obvious why Mike Elias would want to come to Baltimore. There's 30 general manager jobs. You take one if you get it. I do know that he was very inspired by the challenge ahead. Sig, it's less clear why he left Houston. I think that he is somebody who thrives on the challenge, thrives on the building phase, less inspired by the kind of maintenance phase that was facing him in Houston. And I know from having talked to him that he's never been busier in his life, and he is loving the challenge that he's facing as far as setting this organization up. And you're right, it's going to be a several-year process, but setting this thing up the right way to rebuild. I don't think that anybody thinks that a hot start means much in the front office. This is a very long-term plan, and we're just at the beginning of it.
Well, I mean, I see you as a little bit of the Sig whisperer, and, the book was clearly written a little bit through his lens and some of, his observations and the blackjack stuff and all of that, his world travels and the fact that he was a NASA guy and not really a baseball fan, but really like a scientist nerd in the real world. And this whole creation that they're trying to put together is sort of a 2.0 or really a 3.0 if you go back to St. Louis, right? Look, I've been covering sports as long as you've been covering sports. I've written a couple of books and insiders. I'll never forget when Marvin Lewis said to me, the first time he thought he was going to get fired, not the third time, he said to me, we get smarter. I mean, as much as the public thinks like as coaches, we all evolve. I'm a better coach than I've ever been. I understand football better. And as we get older and the hair gets grayer, we really do understand things a little bit better. I'm not sure that baseball is in that position. Even as I watch the broadcast now with Rick Dempsey and with Gary Thorne, who sort of really do eschew a lot of what Sig and what Mike Elias are going to preach in regard to analytics or trying to understand it. Hey, I'm a 50-year-old guy, and Luke starts talking about, all sorts of FIP and stuff that I'm trying to understand. You know what I mean? And that's just me being like a guy who's, looked at bubblegum cards since 1971 and loves baseball and knows the history, and I'm vested in all. But there is a nerdity and a scientific part of this that is so esoteric that there's a lot of levels you can be involved in baseball. But if you're going to sit and talk to Sig Mejdal and you're going to talk to Mike Elias about baseball, they're going to talk at a whole different level than maybe what Whitey Herzog really understood. You know what I mean?
Well, first, I mean, we should say right off the top that if anybody in Baltimore wants to have the opportunity to ask Sig some questions, they could have it on Friday, April 5th. He and I are going to be doing an event at 6 p.m. at the Inner Harbor Barnes & Noble to kind of celebrate the release of the paperback of Astroball. But you'll get a chance for yourself, and he's not somebody who talks publicly very much. But anyone interested in this process, just come on down on Friday night. You'll have the opportunity to see what he talks like. And, I think you're right on one level. Like, yes, this is very high-level stuff that they're doing, very deep as far as analytics. But I think you'd be surprised if you talk to both Sig and Mike. They're not talking about, Babbitt and WOBA and all of these very advanced stats all the time. There's a real human element to it as well. And that's really the one that they talk about day to day. And I think that's what we're seeing now. Nobody really thinks this season matters that much, at least among Orioles fans. Not many expectations. But I think back to when the Astros were in this phase. It's a chance for guys to show themselves for what they are. For guys nobody thinks much of, nobody expects much of, to make a mark and to insert themselves into the future of the Orioles, kind of like a guy named Dallas Keuchel did back in 2013, right? Dallas Keuchel was like a C-level prospect at best, but he viewed these terrible seasons not as something depressing, really, but as an opportunity for him to get playing time at big league level and to do well and to set himself up for the future. And that's exactly what he did. So who knows right now? Maybe somebody like David Hess, who was kind of controversially yanked in the middle of a no-hitter, maybe he is in the process of establishing himself, surprisingly perhaps, as an actual piece going forward. So there's a lot of human intrigue right now above, I'm going to say, all the statistical stuff.
Well, I cover a lot of football, and these preseason games that nobody watches and we all yawn in the third quarter, there are dudes in there fighting for their lives, literally, to be able to do this for a living. And some of them do survive and play 5-6 years in the league and have game-changing money and Kurt Warner stories and whatnot. But in the case of where they are right now, it is a bunch of no-names and who are these guys, but they're all getting this sort of weird, rare opportunity to be the 700th guy in the league, on this team and have a chance to play, right? And for that, you're getting, we would always say, well, the guys in the minor leagues are trying because they're not rich. Nobody rich on this team at this point. Trey Mancini's trying to get rich and a couple of these guys. So from that, I think it's cool. The one thing I would say, Ben, and I love your book, and I probably sold you as many books around here as anybody, certainly in my own circle. The whole Moeller family bought books at Christmas time, so there's a dozen I sold you at least there, and they've all read the book. We've all argued about your book. Your book is like one of those boy book club things. We all sit around and talk about. But the thing about it is the accessibility of the way you made it, right? It is nerdy, it is high level, it is scientific, it is Yale, Harvard, NASA, and all of that, right? And San Jose State too for Sig. But I would say you can get into it as deep as you want to get into it, but if you really want to make that adjustment as a 50-year-old and say, you know what, I'm going to take a calculus class here at 50 and really learn the new baseball, there's a lot involved. It's a commitment, right? Above and beyond a commitment of watching 162 games. But it feels to me like if you're going to be that committed to the Cubs or the Red Sox or the Yankees and you're going to go 162, and this is the way the game is being transacted and signed, and you really want to go deep on why Adam Jones didn't get signed, it's these numbers that say why Dallas Keuchel's not pitching, right? You really do need to understand this. And I guess I go back in 30 years of radio where when I went on the radio here in 91, 92, 93, it was just as important that I understand the economics of Camden Yards, what was going on with the Players Association when they were about to walk out on strike in 94. So I had to get all of that knowledge that didn't come off the back of the baseball card. And it wasn't something Brooks and Chuck talked about but strikes and labor relations, I was 13 years old. They weren't playing baseball. My dad was pissed off. I had to learn about it. I think this is the chance for Orioles fans to move their way of thinking the way that Dallas Keuchel moved his way of thinking and the way a lot of people have moved their way of thinking, that this is a fun time to sort of reinvent baseball in your own mind because the shift is happening on the field. All these changes are coming down the pipe. We're going to have DH in the National League. We're going to have all of this stuff, pitchers that have to pitch to multiple batters, all sorts of stuff. And you're going to have to be on your toes to be a baseball fan. And if Rob Manfred's selling it and all that in a place like Baltimore, it's a new beginning. beginning for them. Now, look, I'm going to beat them up, and I'll do all of that with the Angelos family and what they've done here, and whether this franchise can survive, which is one of the things that I'm really concerned about. This project needs to work because they need to sell tickets because there's not a lot of money here, Ben. So seeing all of this stuff, but diving in on the statistical end right now is something that as a 50-year-old, I need to commit more to, because sometimes I put on MLB Network and it's going over my head, and I don't like that. You know what I mean? I feel like I haven't done my homework, but I feel like the fan base doesn't really demand it here when they're watching Tom Davis and Rick Dempsey every night. I mean, I'm not being mean. I just think Sig and Mike are going to be doing something in a bubble far away, and it may be better that they're there after Friday, of course, with you, but because I don't know that the fan base is really going to understand 105 losses the next 3 years, and they're going to try to preach it. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing coming down the pipeline here, that your book's wonderful and the story's wonderful and there was a parade, but what if there's not a parade this time around?
Well,
and
that's the risk. And I understand everything that you're saying, and I understand why a lot of fans might be kind of upset even when David Hess is pulled after 6 2/3 no-hit innings. I mean, I was a little upset to see that, frankly, you know? I mean, not that it was necessarily the wrong thing for Brandon Hyde to do. It's a long season. He had pitched a couple of days before, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, it's kind of like we watch baseball for these moments where a guy that most people have never heard of has a chance to throw a no-hitter, and then he doesn't actually get that chance. What I would say, at least, and this is an outsider perspective, Nestor, is that last year was such a bottoming out for the Orioles. Like, it was so painful. It was so brutally clear that what they had been doing was not working anymore, that I would think at least a large part of the fan base might be more accepting of a way forward that has been tried and tested and has worked incredibly well elsewhere. I mean, I think, at least from what I'm sensing, and again, I'm an outsider, my perspective is a bit blinkered because a lot of what I get is from Twitter and places like that. But it seems as if at least a good portion of the fan base is welcoming this new way forward because, frankly, last year was just so ungodly bad at 47 or 115.
Man, since the last time we left, right, Machado signs with the Padres, right? We wouldn't have been talking about that back in December, right? And things have moved around here, and there's been a little shift, going on with who's trying to win and who's tanking and all of that stuff. But I would think that the feet that are moving behind the organization right now is all about this number one pick and what's going to come into the pipe. I mean, look, they'll make the most of what they got, and they can find some quad A players and, bring in some guys to go get some big league at-bats and give them a chance, another chance in another organization in many cases. But, the feet on the street really has to be about they have to win and win big at the poker table when you have the number one chip, right?
That's right. And it's definitely analogous to 2012 when they had their first number one pick of 3 in a row in Houston, and they made that very surprising pick to many people around baseball to take Carlos Correa 1-1. He was not anywhere near the consensus top overall pick. In fact, I don't think anybody had him number one. They had him top 10, but nobody else had him number one. But they took him number one, and a big driver of that selection, the big driver, maybe the biggest driver actually, was somebody who was then a special advisor to Jeff Luhnow, and that was Mike Elias. So he gets another shot at it here 7 years later.
Ben Reiter is our guest. The book is Astroball, and he's going to be with Sig Mejdal at the Barnes & Noble at the Inner Harbor, which is just a few steps from my door. So I will be with y'all on Friday night and listening in to hear what Oriole fans have to say. And Ben, and it will be interesting on Friday because the people coming down to see Sig will almost exclusively be people who read your book. I mean, it's not going to be people who want Sig's autograph. And I think if you're into this side of baseball and into what really is sort of making things tick in the modern era, I don't know what the questioning would be on it, but Astroball was a little bit of a baseline of where they were a number of years ago. I would ask you, what's different about 2019 than 2012? I would think cameras, HD, all of the technology. I mean, in 2012, the mobile phones were kind of sort of new, video moving and Wi-Fi and 4G and all that stuff. That's how far we've come in a generation. I would think in baseball, and just what we've seen and what we've heard just in Sarasota about the way the players who were in the organization last year that are now there this year, this training method that you're talking about, that Keuchel, the guys that had to buy into this philosophy and say, this is going to help you as a position player, as a hitter, as a teammate, or as a pitcher, that this way works. And I think there's a lot of that buy-in going on from the young Orioles in the organization. So I don't think you have any worries about that. But I would also say that the blueprint is also probably a little different because they probably have learned a lot over the last decade, stuff that wasn't even available back when they drafted Correa, right?
That's right. And you're right. The buy-in process was a big part of their focus, certainly in St. Louis. And also in Houston in the early days, players pushing back against this stuff, and I would have probably pushed back too. It sounded weird at the time. Now nobody's pushing back, right?
Right.
They know it works.
Not even me.
You don't have to convince these young players to use high-speed cameras to help them shape and design their pitches and use Rapsodo machines to track the spin rate and break of them. The players want this stuff, and they know it will help them. They know it will work. But that kind of comes with a downside, is that everybody else is doing it too, right? Everybody's buying in everywhere on this stuff, and everybody's using it, so it's not quite the advantage it was, even as recently as a year ago. So that's certainly what we're going to be talking about with Sig on Friday. Where are we now? What are the differences, and what's next for the Orioles and for baseball at large?
All right, peel back the onion. You obviously have a relationship with Sig and to some degree Elias and these guys. This whole decision in your mind, now that you see it 90 days later, shocked that they took it to some degree? I mean, it sounds like Sig may have had some reservations, although the Houston thing, the project was built there, right? I mean, like they accomplished their goal, and these are goal-oriented fellas. There was some conjecture that the Angelos family would not be able to lure top-of-school guys. Certainly they paid them, from what I understand, as top-of-school guys, which is a wonderful thing because they deserve that. And I hope that they get the autonomy they're going to need here to do what many have tried to do, in abject frustration with the elder Angelos. I've written books about that. I've been thrown out of the ballpark for, a third of my life now because I've written the truth about that. But I am concerned about money, business, Masson, Chris Davis, just all of it, where the money's going to come from to sustain this thing 4 or 5 or 6 years from now. Even if they do win, I'm a little worried about the whole state of baseball, to be really honest, Ben, but more so here. And, I think you're going to find an interesting circumstance here because you're coming in on opening day. Come in July. you know what I mean? Like, come in when it settles in, when they're not starting the season 3-1 and taking beer showers and, like all that stuff. It's going to be an interesting ride here all the way through. And no one is a bigger Sig fan and Elias fan than I, because it's no fun losing, man. It's no fun in any way for our city, for the economy of our city that, as you know, is struggling. I don't know if you read the news about the mayor here this week, Ben, but you're going to arrive to that as well. So, I've seen the city on fire. I've seen all that stuff happen. And the baseball team's a really, really important part of the town. And I think these guys really understand that part of it, and they will on Friday for sure, because I'll tell them.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that you point out a lot of really smart, applicable things here. And a part of the challenge here, maybe a part that wasn't even there in Houston. They always believed in Houston. They had reason to believe that if this project worked, if they built a winner, then the fans would come back. There would be juice at the ballpark again. They would raise payroll. They'd be making money again. That's all what happened. It seems to be a little less promise of that, or it's a little less definitive in Baltimore for a lot of the reasons you say, that even if this thing works, that Camden Yards will be jumping again. I mean, you kind of look at Cleveland, right, which has had a great team for a long time. They don't have money or to spend, or they won't spend the money they have there. They don't draw big crowds, even though this is a winning, exciting team. So that's another part of the challenge, certainly. But one thing you can be sure of is that they will do everything they can to build a winner, and that they'll do it in a responsible way, such that if they don't have the money to spend, they won't spend it.
I hope they bring in some more of my Venezuelan brothers. Ben Reiter is here. He is from Sports Illustrated. What are you doing lately, right? I mean, like, you're coming in here and doing the Oriole thing this week because of the Astros and whatnot. But, I mean, you're out on the baseball beat. It is an interesting time in baseball. I mean, I'd love to discuss that with you for a couple minutes just because, I think everybody in baseball should be worried about the state of baseball. And as I've pointed out, not only is FIP coming and all these stats that you'll throw at me that I may or may not understand beyond WHIP and WAR and, a couple of the others that I caught on to a little bit early on. And every time I still say he won 20 games last year, Luke smacks me, which is fine. But, I mean, it's just the way I've spoken for 50 years. I understood that when I played Stratomatic in 1984, Ben. But, I guess in the modern era, for me with baseball and the changes that are about to come down the line, I'm wondering whether I'm going to stay in. I think Baltimore is wondering whether we're going to stay in. That when these changes of we're going to assign where players have to play, I mean, all these things that are up in the air, I don't know where it's going to settle out, but I know the owners are going to be the ones that decide. You know how I know that? I was at the NFL owners meetings last week, and it didn't really matter what the coaches or the rules people think or any. It's whatever the owners think, and the owners really do direct the game. And I don't know that the kids here if they fully have grasped that yet, or whether they ever will after 30 years, but I've grasped that, and they're going to tinker with the game. I mean, and Rob Manfred's going to lead this thing, and Bud was a hell of a salesman with the rest of these guys to get whatever Bud wanted to get done. Sometimes foolish things like letting these guys shoot up in the stalls back in the 90s, but I would just say in the modern era, we're about to see an incredible change for baseball that is necessary because kids aren't watching it. And in my community, the team sucks. Everyone's playing lacrosse here, and the girls are playing soccer, and the boys are playing soccer too. But lacrosse is a real issue here for the modern Baltimore Orioles in selling the game of baseball, as is Bryce Harper 80 miles in one direction, and the Nationals really trying hard 38 miles in the other direction. So this is a time, I think, where they're really going to have to sell the game everywhere, in St. Louis and Cincinnati and these places where they have this awesome, cool, sort of older, tired white fan base. And I don't know how they're going to make the game more than niche at this point, because I remember when it really mattered here, and I hope it matters again, but I don't know that I'd bet $1 on it, Ben. I mean, I've been watching this my whole life. I don't know that I'd really bet $1 on these Angelos boys and this modern version of baseball keeping this team here for 15 more years. You know what I mean?
Well, no, there's a lot to digest there, and I think you're right about lacrosse, for one, just to pick out one of the points you made. I wrote for Sports Illustrated a few months ago a story on Paul Rabel's startup lacrosse league, the Premier Lacrosse League, that's starting this summer, kind of this barnstorming tour with all the best pros in the world. And they're approaching this problem from a very modern perspective, heavily digitally engaged on social media. But one of the things that he's really doing is trying to turn players into personalities, right? Or at least allow them to show their personalities, become ideally the sort of connected stars that the NBA is so good at generating and that the NFL is too. I think baseball could use to take some lessons from that startup mentality, actually. Yes, it's a very old sport and a very old league, but I think you have to be nimble like a startup in some ways. Another story I wrote recently for Sports Illustrated is about Alex Bregman, who, yes, another Houston Astro, but he is somebody who has embraced social media, putting himself out there, stirring the pot a lot, being unafraid to show his emotions, things like that.
That's very unbaseball, isn't it? I mean, that's what they push back on the Latin guys for 50 years, right?
But now it's becoming, at least the young generation, including guys like Alex Bregman, are saying, look, this is the future. This is what people like. This is what we like to do. All that traditional stuff can go out the window. If you want to flip your bat, if you hit a home run, flip your bat. That's fine. If you want to pump your fist after you strike me out, pump your fist. You deserve it. I think that kind of stuff will have a much bigger impact on baseball's popularity going forward than, say, shaving some minutes off of the game or some of these other efforts that the commissioners do.
The book is Astroball. I only have it up on my phone as an image because I gave my copy to Luke, and Luke hasn't given it back, and I feel like a jerk. But you can get the paperback edition with the added bonus of, hey, Sig and Mike went off to Baltimore. I wonder how it's going to turn out. And they're going to be down at Barnes & Noble on Friday night, hanging out, signing books, chatting baseball. Sig will be there as well. I will be there on Friday night. So if you want to come and razz me, feel free to do so. And anything else you want to add to this in regard to Friday and your visit to Baltimore and my kind offer to take you over on Michi's and get you some delicious Italian food here? This is a weird time for the Orioles and to be coming in. I guess kind of neat that they won some games here to start the week, but we're going into a new period here and a new era, and I think we're trying to get to know some players around here. All the old jerseys have been retired.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a new era. Look, anything to add? I think that, I just encourage people to come down on Friday night. I think that you'll be surprised by what Sig has to say, by kind of how human the future of the Orioles is. I don't think that you'll come away believing that this is going to be a team run by computers and robots going forward. And I also think that you'll find that, look, there's reasons to be interested in the team now. Like, yes, it's a very future-oriented process, but as we've seen from these early games, there's things to root for, there's things to be invested in right now, even in what's supposed to be kind of an interstitial period before you get good again.
Dude, loved your book. Appreciate the follow out on Twitter as well and your work on SI. And I did see the piece on Bregman last week as well. So keep up the great work. Even if we're not in the race, we hope you come back and take a little dip here. And I really hope that you make $1 trillion when you write Oriole Ball. I will be the first purchaser of Oriole Ball when you write that, okay?
Thanks, man. Well, I'll see you Friday down in Inner Harbor.
I really hope so. Ben Reiter joining us here, SI, and the author of Astroball. And if you haven't read Astroball, you should. And if you're near downtown or want to come downtown or coming down for the games or banging around, come on down Friday at 5 o'clock and say hello. I'll be somewhere on the periphery. They usually frown upon my arrival. I bring facts and questions. They hate that around there. I hope that changes. I really do. I want to love Sig. I want to love Mike Elias. I actually want my media pass back, but that's a whole other. That's not another story. It's the same story, but it's an ongoing story. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel and all of the stuff, including all of our wrestling stuff. It's WrestleMania weekend. Doing a lot of wrestling this week, so you want to check that out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault. Stone Cold, The Rock a couple of times, Vince McMahon, Bruno Sammartino, Bob Backlund. I haven't had Nate on, even though I did interview Nate once. I don't think I had a tape of that one, though. So I find all sorts of weird old stuff that I did on the radio, including L. Rod Hendricks and Mike Messina. I found an hour-long chat with Brooks that I forgot that I did in 1995. All of that now on the BuyAToyota.com audio vault to celebrate an opening day where we're celebrating baseball, but not necessarily, talk of imminent championships around here. But hope to see everybody down at Barnes & Noble on Friday. It will be fun to talk some baseball. It's going to be a great opening day. I'll be the guy who's not drunk during the 7th inning on Thursday, so if you see me at the ballpark, make sure you say hello. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, WNST, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.